All right. Okay, welcome everyone. We are at the final hour for the first day of the Changemaker Forum. So, can I invite all of you to switch on your cameras, at least for the first part, so we get to see who's joined, get to see your lovely faces, get to see your energy. Yeah, we're not meeting in person, so all the energy has to come from within our homes. So, all right. So, a quick show of hands. How many of you attended the crash course on collective teamwork? You can show of hands or you could use the reaction button. Okay, quite a few of you. All right. Fantastic. So now you're just going to carry forward into real life stories. So, can you use the chat box and write down one key takeaway from that crash course? If you didn't attend the collective teamwork crash course and attended some other crash course, you can still write your one key takeaway from your crash course. And I invite the panelists to just take a look at the chat box to see what's emerging from the audience. Okay, so we have some interesting insights coming up. Move at the speed of trust. Always iterate. Be a facilitator instead of a leader. Listen to feedback. Very good insights. I think these insights will fuel our storytelling. Thank you for sharing. Transparency and flexibility. Others, please do share your, it could be one word, it could be a sentence. Praveen says work is better with play. Yes, I agree. I think most of us are adults that refuse to grow up. So work is definitely better with play. All right. So thanks a lot for sharing, everyone. All right. So we want to keep this engaging. Just as a quick, what are we going to achieve today? We are going to have a discussion around this framing question. And the question is, how can we contribute and thrive in a fluid network of teams or a fluid ecosystem of teams that mobilizes around a problem or opportunity? So that's the framing question for this discussion today. We have three lovely panelists, and I'll introduce them in a bit. Um, Before I do that, I would love the audience to be very engaged throughout the session. So every time, so this is the task for you. This is one of my drinking games, but I'll make it a little more lighter. Every time a panelist says teamwork, you have to cheer the panelist, right? So the reaction is there, right? The reaction button, the one with the reaction button. So every time a panelist says teamwork, you have to press the reaction button. Okay, this is one way for me to know you are in it. And this is one way to ensure we don't get drunk. Okay. All right. So that's for the audience. And if you have any questions, please use the chat box. Any questions? Your questions can be silly, can be stupid, can be philosophical. Use the chat box because we are going to dedicate at least 10 to 15 minutes for your questions to be answered. Yeah. So keep the questions flowing. Ishan will keep a track of it and we will bring them back. All right. Fantastic. Great. So with that, let me introduce our three lovely panelists. I'll start with Anthea Ong. I fondly remember Anthea for the Anthea. Can I get a cheer? Okay, you can unmute and cheer so we know you're there. Okay, that's Anthea.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Anthea. I fondly remember Anthea for the numerous conversations we've had over changemaking. We can talk for changemaking for hours, right? So Anthea is a true blood changemaker. She's a walking, talking changemaker. She's also a former nominated member of parliament, an impact entrepreneur. She's founded several social enterprises. One of her organizations is called the Hush Tea Bar, which is a social movement to bring the worlds of hearing and deaf together. She's also a certified yoga instructor and a coach. So she's many things, right? So if you want to find her, you should be next to a beach or next to a few trees or in Juchart, right? So that's where you normally find her. Okay, that's Anthea. Now I'd love to introduce Alvin. Alvin, can I get a cheer from you? You there?
Hi everyone.
Yes, that's Alvin, guys. So Alvin, I think the best way to describe Alvin is the word ESG. Right? Anything to do with ESG, I think Alvin loves to talk about. He is the global ESG lead at Maxion Solar Technologies. Uh, he was actually hired as their first sustainability hire. And prior to that, he was the group sustainability manager at Singtel. And prior to that, he was with Optus in Australia. During the circuit breaker last year, Alvin started an initiative with his friends from NUS. They started an initiative called MEM Cares. MEM stands for Master of Science Environment Management. And their initiative was to bring about more sustainable practices and environmental awareness around disposable cutlery and utensils. Alvin also mentors a lot of young people and a part of several advisory committees. So that's Alvin. And the third person that I would like to invite is Maggie. Maggie, can I get a cheer from you? Yes, so that's Maggie.
Hello, everyone.
So lovely to see you, Maggie. Maggie is with a financial services consulting company called EY. I think you've all heard of EY. She's a partner there, and she's been in Singapore where she's lived and worked for the last 7 years. But prior to EY, she comes from the nonprofit sector. She's a lifelong feminist and advocate for the LGBT plus inclusion. Early in her career, she started supporting homeless young women and survivors of sexual assault in inner city Melbourne. And she was also the founding CEO of an innovative social housing service company. So she's part of several teams within EY championing social innovation and rights. All right, so those are our three panelists. We're going to get started just to warm up. In the meantime, everyone in this discussion, please use the chat box because we would love to answer all your questions. Yeah, so keep the questions coming. Okay, just a warm up question, you guys. What's your favorite team? Since you're talking about teamwork, right? What's your favorite team and why? Let's start with Maggie.
Okay, so my favorite team, like that I'm involved with right at the moment, is a fantastic team of global change makers within EY. So I have my day job, which is as a partner, as you've mentioned, and I have my gay job as well, which is I'm one of EY's LGBT plus global leaders, and my favorite team is the group of LGBT plus members of our employee network group called Unity. And we recently put on a 24-hour non-stop event following the sun across our global network, organising various panels, discussions and events. And we had 250 participants globally. And it was just so amazing to see the incredible teamwork, the incredible diversity that we were able to pull together globally, from every type of the LGBTQ spectrum and allies as well. So it was super great, lots of fun, and completely unstructured. And it wasn't a top-down team, and I know we'll be talking about different sorts of team, but this was very much a team where everybody had a role to play, and it was okay to be creative in the way people teamed, and also the way that people, chose to participate in the event. And I just loved it.
Okay, thank you, Maggie. Over to you, Anthea. Do you want to share your favorite team and why?
It's really hard to pick, especially for someone like me who's a bit of a mad hatter. So I wear multiple hats, and I'm involved in so many things at any one time. And also at the beautiful age of 53 this year, you can imagine I've also gone through hundreds and hundreds of teams. I'll say that my favorite team is the next team that I'll be part of. And I don't mean to be a bit of a smart aleck with this answer, but I think I do feel that each team I'm on in the present always seems to be my favorite team, right? At this very point in time, because I'm learning what I could do better from the last team that I've been on, right? Or I was in. So the teamwork experience has also, I think, changed through my life as a result of the different roles I played in these teams, whether it's, as a leader, as a facilitator, as an implementer, or otherwise. But if you push me to pick one, I would say my family team, actually. Something I'm obviously very thankful for, because not every family behaves like a team necessarily, just like not every group is actually a team, right? Or has teamwork. Why do I say that that my family team is my favorite team? Because I think we truly complement each other with our strengths, and I was thinking about this, right? I think we exhibit two key ingredients of a true team, and that is collective work and mutual commitment. I kind of take that for granted for a family, but then actually, it's not always there. And when it's there, we kind of take it for granted. And also how we have solved problems and made significant and sustainable changes to each other's lives. I was the beneficiary of that teamwork when I had my colossal collapse, right, from a broken marriage and a broken business that left me with only $16 15 years ago. And also recently, when we came together again as a team to take care of mom when she was hospitalized. So, yeah, so I actually think, if I can may add, if I may add, I actually think it would be really awesome if we bring teamwork principles into a family, right? So that we are actually more intentional about how and why we come together instead of thinking we're stuck with each other, or we have to sort of live with each other. So
Yeah.
that would be it. I think
Okay.
it's important to put it out there.
Thanks for sharing, Anthea. I never thought, yeah, I think family is one of the best teams to be part of. So for the audience, right? I think you're missing it. Anthea said teamwork twice. Nobody clicked the cheers button. So the audience, this is the rule. Every time a panelist says teamwork, you have to hit the reaction button and do this. So the reaction just pops up. Okay, this is how I know you're listening. All right. Okay, great. So Alvin, over to you. What is your favorite team and why?
So I would say that I'm very, very fortunate and grateful to be in a role where, or rather in a job that pays me to do good. So throughout my career, where I was part of many teams, cross-functional, whether it's project teams or even my own direct team, they all create impact. So more like Anthea, every team I work with is really very high energy, love it, and there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of teamwork. So that's something that I truly feel. But again, if I were to pick, what I would say that the team that I never got to be part of or never got to visit is actually the Globe Telecom team in Philippines. So in my previous role in Singtel has a network of regional associates in Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and India. I love the Globe team. Not only they create impact, not only they break threshold, because we work on many, many projects together in the E, in the S, especially social innovation, very, very prime to this. And I think that my favorite team is them because they really know how to have fun. So I think that was one comment there, is that they make work fun and they make things really lively. And I think that it's important to also enjoy the process, then also just concentrate on the outcome. So that's where true teamwork comes together. The lines are blurred, relationships are forged, work relationships, respect is formed, trust is formed, which is one of the key points too. So that's something that I really truly cherish. And I was supposed to visit them last year, part of work trip, but COVID broke out. So that was quite a pity because we're supposed to collaborate on many initiatives. Yeah.
Got it. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Alvin. Thanks a lot, all of you, for sharing the teams you love to be part of. I heard some nice words like fun, unstructured, family. So I think this is what we have a affiliation towards. So thanks a lot for sharing that. So let me go back to Maggie. So Maggie, you are a partner at EY. You've been part of civil society. You are part of multiple teams within EY. So can you just give us some stories or experiences on how does collective teamwork look like in your line of work?
Yeah, I'm actually going to give an example that goes back a few years now to when I first started my involvement in collective teams and teams that were specifically about change. So the beginning of my life as an activist. Because I think it's a really a good illustration of how we were able to pull together a really diverse group of people who had a common goal, and that can be really challenging. I think some of the most difficult aspects sometimes of teaming is definitely around how we cope with diverse views and perspectives and so forth, and how we all find a common ground to work collectively towards a particular goal or objective. And so I'm going to take it back now. I'm embarrassed to say how many years it is. It's probably about 25 years at least. So I was living in Melbourne, and had really just started my life, my professional life, and I was working for a service that was supporting women and children escaping domestic violence. And through that work that we did, we provided housing and support services as well. And through that work, because we provided also housing and support for women who had been in the criminal justice system, and in particular provided supported housing for women and their kids who were exiting from prisons. And so through that, I became very involved with, very exposed to some of the reasons that led to women being imprisoned in Australia at that point of time. And a lot of that was to do with, a variety of factors. Almost all the women that I interacted with had experienced sexual abuse or violence within their family homes when they were children, went on and formed relationships where domestic violence was a common feature, drug and alcohol abuse, periods of homelessness. So really women who are very marginalised within our communities. And I could really see that there were some structural disadvantages that were impacting these women, and the criminal justice response at the time women really didn't seem commensurate with the non-violent crimes that they were committing. Because most of the crimes were due to social security fraud, so claiming benefits that the government felt that they weren't entitled to as single parents, or crimes related to drug and alcohol addiction. So I started working with a feminist collective that had set up and was working with inside one of the women's prisons at the time, Fairley Women's Prison it was called at the time. And so there it was really about collaborating with women who were current inmates, former inmates, as well as other workers such as me who were working for community support services, activists who were just very passionate about the topic. We had people who were involved with religious organisations. We had members, people who were involved with political organisations as well and committed to this issue. People involved with the criminal justice system as lawyers or various things. And together, we looked at and did a lot of work about how we could make the conditions for women and their children as best as possible. And then things took for a turn for the worst when the government at the time made the decision that they wanted to move the women's prison and incorporate it into a maximum security men's prison that was privately run, so that the land that the prison was on could be redeveloped into upscale housing. And what we immediately saw is that what limited dignity these women had and the ability for them to keep young children with them in prison for the first 2 years of their life would be lost entirely. So we really saw that this was going to be a detrimental impact. So we did all the formal structural advocacy issues, lobbying Parliament, parliamentarians, having press conferences, and so forth. And then we reached a point where it was time to get a little bit down and dirty. And so what we did is we had a vigil, and we set up a camp, outside the gates to, just make sure that the prison wasn't going to be emptied in the middle of the night and so forth. So there you go. Lots of different things that we did
Awesome.
there, but it was really great.
So I think while you were sharing, one thing that clearly came up was the power of collective teamwork, right? And the kind of work you could do. So thanks a lot for sharing that. And just over to Anthea. Anthea, you've spent a lot of time in civil society, government. So the big burning question is, how does collective teamwork work in the government or in civil society? What are some challenges you faced, and how did you overcome some of them?
Wow, I won't be able to respond to the
Actually, this
first
is a
part of
real conversation. We're real,
uh,
so keep it real.
huh?
The conversation here is real, so you can keep it real.
No, I have no issue keeping it real actually. But I think I would say that where the government is concerned, and actually within the government, there is a whole set of dynamics that also sometimes create challenges between sort of ministries and agencies, and that really comes down to this big steamship that has been built in silo, obviously for a good reason, just like how the corporate sector used to be like that, right? Where everything is sort of siloed vertically. So that I think that creates a lot of challenge, right, for a lot of the sort of within the sort of intra-government and inter-agency type of teamwork. But it's not to say they don't. And like I said, I can't speak for what is universal, but some of the projects that I've been involved with, especially when I was sitting on national committees, um, whether it's in the social services sector, whether it's in the tech sector, in the past, or even in the business sector that involves and are put together by the government, you can see that it varies based on the ministries and the culture within the ministries and how they then have built trust over the years, right, before that project. So that's within the government, amongst agencies within the government. I think within the civil society, I think it's famous that I think not famous. I think we all know that within the civil society, what makes the civil society so exciting is just how, to a large extent, how unstructured it is, right? And how there's so much of a organic sense of building community, right? And even within the same sector, you don't actually necessarily always see collaboration per se between the different groups that are working on the same issue, never mind sort of cross issue, right? Cross sectoral type of collaboration. And that's what actually really got us to set up a good space, right? The cooperative, which is Singapore's first cooperative of changemakers, to really try to sort of retain, the retained energy that comes with not being put into silos or categorized or fixed, right, into hard and fast rules, but at the same time having that um, that 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 systemic view of how we all connect within the ecosystem, right? So letting the system, even within the civil society, sees itself. So that's and actually for me, what I discovered, especially in civil society, is as well-meaning as these efforts might be, when we are so fragmented, we actually create inefficiencies, in the sense that some parts of the communities that we're trying to serve becomes overserved and some parts become underserved, right? Because we just don't know what each other is doing. So I think that collective teamwork, if you bring it to the really high level of, across civil society, there's a need to bring in some institutional, um, um, framework to hold us together in the sense of giving us some visibility to where we all are, right, in the map. And then if you talk about the government and civil society, that's a whole different discussion in terms of the collective teamwork aspect of it, right, between government and civil society. Much is going on right now. I think those of us who are in Singapore know that there is this effort called Alliances for Action, that has been started since the last general election, but it's also part of the COVID recovery process or strategy. And so that's to be seen. I think that because of the power differential, every time a government-led initiative come in, it's always gonna stay very much within the broader scope. And I think yeah, I think that may not actually allow a space, a truly safe and trusted space for more radical ideas and innovations to come through, which
Got it.
is can be a pity. So that those would be my take on sort of the yeah the two big parts. But at the high level, that's where I see. But let's also always remember that when we talk about teams, we can talk about them intellectually and even anecdotally, but really we can never truly get it right unless we understand that a team, no matter how large or how is a team of teams or interconnected teams, it's always a living human system,
Mm.
right? So we must always go back to what motivates humans, what drives humans to come in groups together. And yeah, that I think is something that we mustn't forget, the powerful influence of social dynamics in a team.
I think you just hit the nail on the wall. It's the human system, right? It's a huge, powerful human system that keeps evolving and changing.
Yeah.
I think that's the key. So thanks a lot for sharing, Anthea, your experiences in government and civil society. I'm just going to ask this question to Alvin. While I do that, I want the audience to think of a few questions because we would love to answer the burning questions you have from the crash course. You can use the chat box to put down your questions and we will try to address them. If you have it for a specific speaker, you can mention at speaker name and question, and we will go over them in the next 15, 20 minutes. So, Alvin, you are in sustainability, and I think there's a huge call for collaboration in that particular sector to really tackle the problem around climate change. So, just putting few words out there, and if you can share some experiences around it. So, the word collaboration is creaming across collective teamwork, building trust, setting agreements with people. So, these are a few things that are coming up. So, can you share some experiences from your day job at Maxion, from the initiative that you started on how collaborative teamwork has enabled you to achieve some of your shared goals?
Thanks. Yeah, so I'd like to share a bit more. I think that climate change is really brought to the forefront. Green recovery, you hear all these topics being talked globally in the discourse and also local conversation. So very happy to see the green plan. Um, the thing is, sustainability, climate change, the knowledge, the awareness, and also the impetus to move this varies across countries, varies across demographics, and also vary across organizations. Why do I say that? I mean, if you see plastic straws, you see plastic waste, plastic use, you see, because I was in Australia before and Maggie was there, there's a lot of awareness of all of this use of um, plastic, and there are alternatives for that. But if we look at, let's say, developing countries, if there are no alternatives, and also the infrastructure may not be ready to look at recycling, then sometimes it's also a bit hard, it's a bit gray to ensure that you ban plastics. So this is the similar issue for climate change. If you break it down, climate change, I mean, how I would say is that impact on the environment, that is climate change, impact on and impact from. So impact on is how do humans, how do corporates, organizations, government, countries contribute positively or negatively to climate change. And on the other spectrum is how do they get an effect of climate change, whether it's disasters, whether it's extreme heating, or even, I would say, even let's say you have floods and they're in different countries. So the thing is, everyone feels and experiences climate change differently. And if you want to build teamwork, sometimes you need to build the understanding of technical jargons. There's always about science-based targets, there's net zero. What does net zero mean? What does carbon neutral mean? What does zero carbon mean as opposed to net zero? And what does zero carbon then mean too? So there are a lot of these jargons that are throwing around in this whole space. So I think that it's important to, number one, bridge this jargon, bridge this field of sustainability because it's very esoteric. Make it simple for people to understand. In the next 10, 20 years time, I mean, sometimes people talk about climate change as intergeneration inequity. Sometimes people talk about climate change as affecting the prosperity of the future generations. If you break it down, you can just say, how about your children, your nephew, your nieces, your grandchildren, your grandniece, grandnephew, something that is personal to them. How will they live in a lifetime that we see many animals or plants being extinct, endangered? A lot of people are becoming climate refugees, including your loved ones. That might bring the notion closer to them. Then, once you establish this technical jargon or relationship, I think that's important to tell them what are actionable items that they can do, whether it's at work or personal life. If let's say for work, a lot of them span across different organizations, span different departments. What is one thing that you ask from them? And start small, because often for me, because I'm in sustainability role, sometimes it's easy to ask them to do this, bridge this gap, have procurement courses in supply chain, but it's very, very difficult. So build this trust. Is a multi-year journey. Climate change is here to stay. I think it's important to build that relationship, the branding, and also build your personal, I would say, relationship and branding, not just within your team, but across the teams. So that's what really worked for me to drive change internally.
So I think thanks for sharing that, and you just nicely framed it within the context of climate change. And my key takeaway is you said trust is a multi-year journey. It's a multi-generational journey, and there's a different set of people we have to build trust with, right? Because we don't want the younger generation to look at us and say, "You screwed up the planet," right? So that's not the kind of attitude. All right, so we're in the last 15 minutes of our discussion, and we have a question from Rob, and the question is: the pandemic has changed our understanding of teamwork in a virtual environment, right? What have been some of your biggest takeaways from the past 2 years? So maybe a takeaway from each panelist, or you could choose to pass the question too. Yeah, what has been your biggest takeaway from the past 2 years?
I think for me, the biggest one is I need to connect much more with people than previously. So I think the absence of face-to-face connection. So in my job every day, I work as part of a global firm. So there's always been a certain degree of Zoom-based calls and so forth, because people were rarely, often are not physically located. But with my team here in Singapore, very much, I spend much more time connecting with people, organising purposeful meetings that create teamwork, and trying to be creative about how you do that and how you bridge the chasm of real human engagement that I'm afraid these Zoom calls, automatically create. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm so over Zoom calls. I can't wait for us to sort of return to some normalcy. But a lot more team-based calls and a lot more individual calls and follow-ups as well, and really checking in, not just around professional issues, but how people are going. People are really having a hard time at the moment. So, definitely checking in with my members of my team and asking about them, because also through these calls, this virtual environment, for many of us, we have the workplace entering our home, right? Here you see, my guest room, which I've set up as a spare, a work from home environment. So when we have our cameras on and we're suddenly in our colleagues and team members' personal space, I think it's important, one, to be respectful of that and realize that people actually are human beings and are having human impacts from the current context.
Got it. I think, Maggie, that was a really good answer. Thank you very much for sharing. One thing that stuck for me was purposeful meetings, and how do you connect with people individually? We have some more questions that's come in the chat. Maybe I'll take some of the others and direct it to Anthea and Alvin and Maggie. Please feel free to jump in. We have a question from Kai who asks about what are your experiences of trying to connect a team that is made of people with different personalities? What are some of the ways you've managed to overcome that and perhaps help your team grow closer and trust each other more? Whoever takes first dibs answers this question, then we move to the next one. Yeah, I think that's the game. Who
You want
wants
me to
to?
go?
Okay, sure, Alvin, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm very fortunate again to work with people from different countries and people from different departments. So I really work with people from different personalities. How you work with an engineer is very different with how you work with a finance person who is very sharp in the numbers, stats. So there are different ways. So how I say that is the best way to establish the trust and grow closer is, first thing, as an individual, if you want to be the connector, I strongly believe in this concept called craftsmanship. It's important to be highly skilled at what you're doing because that gives you the credibility. So let's say if you're ESG or in whatever field, maybe in healthcare, it's important to know your field well, having the expertise in your direct field. But also, there's now a theory, the T-shaped theory, whereby you learn also breadth of skills, whereby you know what people are also doing in some extent, of course, not as deep as your own expertise. And I like that because I think T-shape is really good. Having both breadth and depth gives you the ability to understand people's motivation, people's, I would say, in corporate terms, KPI, what are their agenda. So that gives you that ability. And if I would like to challenge maybe multiple T, maybe a pie shape. So how do you build this? How do you make the team grow closer and trust each other more? What I learned, I really took away this when I work across cultures, that it's important to not talk shop at the beginning. It's important to establish rapport. Frame yourself as an individual. Everyone has family. Sorry, I correct myself. Everyone has loved ones, right? Everyone have people that they care about. Everyone has their own personal life. So I think that if you bridge that gap, that background, you establish yourself as individuals, not as someone who's trying to drive change. Of course, change maker is important, but you need to bridge that gap, find commonalities, find similarities, and that gives you the ability to then break down the ice. And then when you move on to your next item, that is maybe work, maybe a project together, then people will see you as an individual. And sometimes this defrays that some sense that you see defensiveness or fighting for your own ideals. When people see people as people, then there's the ability to create more rapport and more trust. So to summarize, I would say build up your credibility, be a craftsman, and don't talk shop at the first instant.
All right, don't talk shop in the first instance. I like that. I like that sentence. Thanks, Alvin. Anyone else wants to add to that question, or if you see
Can I
any?
chime in here, Rajesh?
Sure, Anthea, please.
Just so that we also thank you. I also want to flag that Kai is a great question, but I also want to say that it's never just about personalities. I want to also put it out there that we would have teams that are made of folks with different abilities, right? And which is my experience at Harsh. Harsh Tiba, was actually at one stage. Later on we actually made it more mixed, but at one stage was completely made up of differently able folks, right? And so I think one of the most important thing, which Alvin also alluded to, I think is really, and I think one of the things that you learn from the crash course as well, is it's really building this team at the speed of trust. But also I would add that it's actually meeting the team members that made up your team where they are, right? How do you hold space for these differences? As much as it's important, obviously, to find a commonality, because that's how you actually create an inclusive culture, by using the similarities and what we all share as a foundational block to build a dynamic team. Because a dynamic team, really, you want the differences, right? You want a diversity, but the diversity can create a lot of challenges because of the different levels of abilities, of personalities, of perspectives, of experiences. So I think what needs to happen is a safe space, and that's, I think, it's very much the role of a leader of the team, to hold that space, that safe space where these diversities are being supported in a space to for everyone to share where they are coming from, right? So we all have to. I mean, I used to say that with Harsh, if I was going to actually look at Harsh in the past as a CEO of a business, we would actually have been kind of everywhere in the world because we had so many invitations to go to different cities in the world. But for me, it was more important that Harsh grows at the pace of the team, right? Rather than at the pace of the potential of what Harsh could be. And it was a learning for myself, but I think those are the kind of decisions when you happen to be privileged enough to either be a leader or a facilitator of a team or a mobilizer of a team. I think it's really important to see what really drives this team, right? What purpose are we serving as a team? And then to not actually not avoid celebrating the diversity, actually the differences, right? But actually, how would these differences come through to make your team realize the potential, both individually for the members as well as a collective?
I'm going to get in here too, and I'm going to be really blunt, and that is it sucks. Like, really, it does. Working with people who are different to you, who think differently, and who challenge your base assumptions, and it can be frustrating. You can have tension and conflict, and it can slow things down. But guess what? We are all getting better about celebrating diversity, right? We like it. We know that it's beneficial, but we are really not getting there in terms of moving towards inclusion. Because inclusion is not just about having different people. It's about appreciating that they will come with different views, different perspectives, and they don't, look, act, and think just like we do. And so the challenge that presents to us as individuals is enormous, because we have to challenge ourselves on our own privilege, the privilege to hold our own point of views without any reflection whatsoever, the privileged status that we might hold for different reasons within a group and within a broader society. And so it's not easy. And we sometimes all want to kind of, really feel warm and fuzzy about diversity, but really a lot of that diversity comes without proper inclusion. And that's not really what this is all about.
I can't agree with you more, Maggie. And it's been so challenging. And I feel like the whole 6 years within Harsh, the biggest challenge and the biggest role I play is actually to dance with those challenges, right? Of this, sometimes magic is created with this collision. Sometimes it's just massive, massive personality clashes and shouting matches and all of that. And I think that's actually but that's actually part of it. I think you can't have put it in a better way. I think we can't just talk about D&I so tokenistically, right? There's a real growth that comes from it, and there's real rumble we have to go through, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe just to jump on too. Oh,
So I think I
Sean?
have to call time because we only have
Sure.
2 minutes before everybody heads to the main stage and we wrap up this day.
Sure.
So can I just get your elevator pitch, something that the audience can leave with, maybe one sentence, one thing you want them to remember from this session. Um, Whoever is ready, maybe Alvin, do you want to start? Like something you want to leave the audience
Sure.
with?
I think I like the previous question that Maggie answered. What's the biggest takeaway? So I think the biggest takeaway for me is really that change can happen very rapidly, as demonstrated in the pandemic. And perhaps this is a preparation of, although a very strong and devastating one, to prepare us for greater challenges of mankind. But we show as a global community that we can amass change greatly. So I think that I'm an optimist. I see this that with collaboration, with teamwork, whatever you're doing, with the trust, with the relationship, I think we can forge a greater future in the organization, in the path and focus areas that you're solving for.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alvin. Anthea, Maggie, closing comments, advice.
Yeah. Hey, if you want to create real change, you need to break the rules. So sometimes you need to sort of step out of your comfort zone and step out of, I guess, the confines that we're sometimes asked to play within, and realize that bigger changes exist sometimes outside of that, and sometimes on the fringe as well. So don't be afraid. Get into trouble. Good trouble.
Good trouble. Anthea?
I love that, Maggie. Yeah, I would say also that innovation often happens at intersections. So go out there and talk to people different to you, teams that similarly are not doing the same thing as you are. I think you might get ideas. I will also, if I may, leave you with this that I hold very dearly, especially as a change maker, but also sort of holding teams, is curiosity is the first one, all right? So be curious, be open to possibilities, have a growth mindset, aspiration, aspire. So hope, dream, please don't, stop dreaming. Let that be your superpower actually. Resilience, I think that's much used term, but let's know that, that's really about not throwing away what you have actually come through in your past challenges, because every time you go through a challenges, you're actually building up your resilience bank, right? So you can draw down when you face a challenge. And the last one is empathy. Obviously, for me, I think that's the most important skill across everything you do. So be able to sort of connect with each other, but also self-compassion too. Now, if you take the CARE, I will end you and leave you with care, right? So it actually comes together to form care. And so, yeah, care for yourself, care for others, and care for the planet.